In the previous video, we learned about the basic idea of a suspension. That is that in our current harmony, we have a dissonant note that was held over from the previous harmony. So we changed harmonies, but we kept one of the notes from the previous harmony, and that note is considered to be suspended over our current harmony, not part of it, just suspended over it. Suspensions are always measured with respect to the bass note. So we only really have to have two notes to create a suspension. But more commonly, you'll find suspensions in a four-voice texture, a SATB texture or soprano, alto, tenor, bass, vocal texture. And so we have them here in that type of texture. When we're labeling these suspensions, we label them by the two-note dissonance that's created between the bass and whatever our suspension is. And so our naming convention then is based upon those numbers. Here it's a 7-6 suspension, here it's a 4-3, and here it's a 9-8. Remember again that fourths are considered dissonant. So let's look at these suspensions, and let's look at them in two voices first and then in these four-voice textures. If we look at this first one, we can see that it starts out as a C in the tenor. It remains a C even though the bass note changes, and then finally it moves downwards to a B. So we have this bass changes, but the C remains in the top and is dissonant. Finally resolves downwards to a consonant. Within the whole chord, we have this. A 1-6 chord going to a 7 diminished 6. We still have that dissonant interval of a seventh moving down to a sixth though. One more time. The C in the tenor. C remains even though it's not part of this B diminished chord. And it resolves down now. In the next example over here, we have what's called a 4-3 suspension, and that's because it creates a dissonance of a fourth between the bass that resolves down to a consonant third. G to C is a fourth, G to B is that third. So here's the preparation. Starts out as a chord tone, and I'm going to play it in just the two voices at the moment, so the bass and the alto. Our bass now moves down to the G. The C remains the same, and then finally resolves down to the B. Now in this case too, I had a distance that's greater than an octave. And if we have greater than an octave distance, which we call a compound interval, we just reduce it to an interval with an octave, or a simple interval. So we won't be using ones greater than an octave, with one exception, and that's the 9-8 suspension. Okay, so one more time. We have the two C's, the bass and the alto. Then we change bass. And instead of labeling this as 11th, we'll label it as a fourth, going to the third. Now the whole thing in the four-voice texture. Finally, over here we have a 9-8 suspension. So we start out with this B. The bass note moves up to an A, but the B remains, and then finally moves down to a consonant octave. Whole thing. And now the sixth chord. You might have noticed something kind of strange there though. this B that I'm starting out with is actually the resolution of the previous chord. So I had preparation, suspension, and resolution. But right as I resolved the note, I used the same note to become the preparation or chord tone in the next figure. It's like one note is being used for two purposes. And when that happens, it's called a chain suspension. Just one suspension linked to the previous suspension by the resolution tone. So let's listen to both of those in a row. I resolve to the B, and now the B, the resolution, becomes the preparation for the next one. One more time straight through. And this whole thing can actually be played together, starting from the beginning here with our 1/6 chord. So let's do that.